Hi, everyone. I'm Frank Rubino. I'm a solutions director for MarkLogic in New York. I'm here in my home in New Jersey right now, and I'm talking with Drew Wanchowski. He's one of my teammates here at MarkLogic. And I wanted to talk to Drew today about an application that we built as a proof of concept for a financial services customer. And Drew, this application has a really nice UI. What was the customer trying to do?
Yeah, so the customer was basically trying to track reviews from employees to give a better understanding of their sentiment and how they're enjoying their jobs at the institution. So they went to two public to get that information. One was Glassdoor and the other was Indeed. However, those websites had different searching mechanisms, different presentations of the content. We're able to pull reports of that data out of those systems pretty easily.
Those were just disparate formats. They didn't share the same data model, and somehow they wanted to see them both in the same dashboard.
Exactly. And since they've been using analytical tools inside the organization, they're kind of used to seeing data visualizations and their data presented in a holistic way. So what we did was create a data hub for HR reviews, specifically around employees. And we indexed those within MarkLogic and then created this user interface with the community tool called Grove.
And maybe before we get into the back end and stuff, though, Drew, what does this thing do? What can I click on here?
Sure. So we have quick aggregations around the content for average ratings, sentiment, and locations. You can also see facets. So we can go down to a collection, particular for the source they came from, or we can facet into the locations, positions of employees, and their ratings.
Right. So this is all the stuff that came from Glassdoor.
Yep.
And this is all the stuff that came from Indeed. Yeah. Cool. And then if I want to see all the 5-star ratings, I can do that with this cool facet. Right. That's really cool, and I can see them on the map and everything. That's really neat. So you said that behind this, underneath this, is the MarkLogic Data Hub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can model that data using a tool called Envision, also another MarkLogic community tool.
That's where I come in.
Frank, you're an expert on that tool, so I'll let you.
I'm going to show you this tool, which I would urge you to take a look at a little bit closer. It's a cool tool. It's a community tool. We developed it at MarkLogic and we released it to the community on GitHub. And it gives you a way to visually model data. So here is our visual model of reviews that come from different sources. And you can see it's just an interactive graph here. It's kind of fun. And it's something that you could easily, if you're an architect, a data architect, you could easily communicate to your business counterparts what your data model looks like and what you're dealing with. So here we have some reviews and they have some positions and some locations. It's pretty easy to understand in this case and properties for them. And when we ingest data against this model, like we took those Glassdoor reviews and those Indeed reviews, and we ingested them into a data hub, and then we mapped those data sources into this model. And we used, Drew, I know you know this tool pretty well. So to do that part of it, we went to, we used our Quick Start tool, which is part of our Data Hub framework, and we built these data processing flows.
So we created an independent flow for each data source. So we have a flow for Glassdoor and Indeed, which share the same entity model. And the cool thing about Envision is that the models that you define are automatically exported to MarkLogic Data Hub and put into the version control system as well.
Oh, I can show you. Would you like? I think it would be cool for people to see is just to take a look at what that environment of building one of these things is on the back end, the pieces that you put into the version control system. So let me do that really quickly. Now I'm going to shift from looking at a GUI tool to looking at a coding tool. And part of the reason for doing that is what Drew and I wanted to do is give you guys watching a 360-degree view of the way you build and develop, one of these data hubs and one of these data hub applications. So we have these GUI tools for modeling, and we also have a coding framework which develops this kind of code skeleton for you, puts this whole thing automatically on your disk, and you can open it with something like I'm using code. You can use IntelliJ or whatever it is that you like to use to open and edit these things. And you can edit things like those flows that Drew and I were just talking about in code, and check it into your version control system and check it out and control it that way. And yeah.
Is that since it's all code and getting scaffold for you exactly what to do in terms of best practices as well. So
right.
Once all this is generated for you, you have an idea of what the data hub is, and you can deploy these to your other servers using your standard CI/CD pipelines or build tools.
Right, right. Like, what would people use? What would they might use?
Some folks use Jenkins or Circle CI to do builds. Right. So any of those code deployment tools that are able to support Gradle builds can deploy a data hub.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so this is the back end code stuff, and then you get back to the front end where we were talking about modeling data and mapping it. And Drew, you had a really great way of describing this. So why don't you talk about this? What happens on this team?
So within the flow, we have a mapping step that takes our raw data from the disparate sets and put it into a canonical model. And a lot of the times, other systems require you to do this by code, either coding SQL or coding Java. But with the data hub, we go configuration first. So we have a mapping tool here that allows you to do one-to-one mappings, as well as a out-of-the-box set of functions that are commonly used. So we can quickly create our canonical model just through the configurations themselves.
We got those star facets, right? Just by doing a memory lookup.
Yeah, and since MarkLogic is a document database and supports Unicode standards, we can use the full set of Unicode to be able we can index the full set of Unicode within the database and search on those stars if we really wanted to as well. So that's how we drive that fascinating.
Right, right. And if we wanted something more complicated, we could write our own custom functions and plug them into this mapping tool pretty easily. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so that's and you do all this in this context of this kind of step-by-step flow. The movement of the data state from one step to the next is all automated for you. It's pretty cool. Okay, so you get this and you run your data against these little maps here, which have come from this map, which you created visually, and then you go back to to check on how well your data fits with your business need. You can use a tool here, which is part of Envision, called Explore, which gives you a graph view of your data. And you can see here that I've got some data that I pulled into my data hub. These are reviews, and these are mapped according to what you just saw with that mapping tool. And now I can inspect them and inspect the relationships there. So I can see that, I've got a whole bunch of reviews for this relationship manager position, and I can see what locations they're in. And I can even do some searches here, like something that might be interesting, which I saw cropping up in some of these reviews as we were playing with this, is people actually write in the reviews about, did their position afford them enough time to go to the bathroom? And if you're someone who's in an HR department saying, is my company a good place to work for? Like, you know, it's not a completely intuitive thing that you might model for, but because you got this great flexible data model underneath here and everything's indexed because it's MarkLogic Data Hub, you can actually do searches for kind of weird, unexpected connections like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so once you see your models all working here, the MarkLogic Data Hub exposes a REST API, and that front end that we showed in Grove is consuming those front end APIs. So
let me head back over to Grove so we can let's clear that facet and just the whole thing.
A developer can build a search application without knowing anything about MarkLogic and what's under the hood. So all they have to know is how to communicate with a REST endpoint and how to process the JSON that comes back from those endpoints. So those same searches, Frank, that you were doing in an Envision tool, you can do them in here as well and see the data being presented in a slightly different way.
Oh, cool. So let's try that. Last one I did. You know, I mean, why not? Oh, and look at that. So this graphic is telling me that most of the time when people do mention that term, they're kind of giving it like not a great review.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And it shows you the offices around the country where there may be some problems with that.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah, what's also interesting is that you'll see in the positions it's really around specific positions as well.
Yeah. So like if I type balance, we'll talk in reviews about work-life balance, and you can see here it's spread pretty much. Where's our position? Yeah. So here we have a lot of relationship managers who talk about work-life balance, I guess, and they're showing up here in our facets. It's really cool.
Yeah, and overall the sentiment is pretty good for the organization in terms of work-life balance. So common things that you would be searching for as an HR analyst is how are people enjoying the work-life balance, the benefits, the compensation, things like that. So it's pretty easy to just come in here and drop those key terms that you're always looking for right into the search and get them mapped for you as well as aggregated.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that this is incremental. So if you discovered things like maybe there's a couple of data quality issues with my some of these data sources, you know, like you might say, okay, well, now let me go back to my data modeling process and account for those kinds of issues. So I might come back here and, you know, some of this, even I could write some basic logic to account for data quality issues, redo it.
Yeah, totally. And this is very much an iterative process. What you're seeing here was only built in a few days with one data engineer and one front end resource. So just thinking about the things that you can do in the future is pretty amazing, because you can just build something real quick, test it out, see how people like it, and pivot from there if it needs to go in a different direction.
So cool. So thank you everyone for tuning in. This has been our overview. Let me go back and close with the finished product because it's very very cool looking here. This is the finished product. This is the thing we created in less than a week, I guess, on this with this data. And we urge you guys to check out our tools, and especially the Data Hub framework and the ecosystem that's evolving around that. And I want to thank my great colleague Drew Wanchowski, and I think we'll sign off until next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.